The void between stars is not silent. It thrums with the bass notes of gravity wells, sings with the radiation choirs of pulsars, and whispers with the ghostly echoes of long-dead suns. To the galactic hegemony, this cosmic symphony was a known score, played across a million worlds, conducted by the immutable laws of physics and supremacy. And supremacy, for 7,000 cycles, had worn the same face, the iron-boned, chitin-plated visage of the Kthari Empire. From their homeworld of crystalline spires and singing metals, the Kthari had risen. Their logic was impeccable, their technology refined to an art form, their warships embodiments of lethal grace, sleek, silver daggers capable of splitting planets. They didn't conquer through brute rage, but through absolute, overwhelming, and utterly reasonable superiority. To resist was not brave, it was irrational. A flawed equation to be corrected. And in their relentless calm expansion, they eventually turned their compound, multifaceted eyes upon a small blue-green world in an unremarkable spiral arm. Designation: Sol 3. Species self-identifier: human. The initial scout reports were dismissive. Bipedal, carbon-based, limited lifespan, the Grand Assessor droned to the Imperial Conclave, his mandibles clicking with soft derision. Primitive fission-based weaponry, nation-states locked in perpetual, illogical internal conflict. Atmospheric toxins. They have barely tamed their own biosphere. Their greatest achievement is a few fragile habitats on their moon and their nearest planetary neighbor. A Class 7 pre-contact species. They pose no strategic value beyond basic mineral extraction. The Conclave agreed. Standard Protocol 7 would be enacted. A single Imperial dreadnought, the resplendent Clarion, would enter their system, broadcast the articles of subjugation, and receive the species' unconditional surrender. It was a formality. The psychological impact of a hegemony warship in low orbit usually reduced any species to odd compliance. The humans, with their chaotic history, might require a single precise kinetic strike on an unpopulated zone as a demonstration. A gentle nudge toward the correct answer. The resplendent Clarion, a 20-kilometer-long marvel of gravitic drives and plasma lances, slipped into the Terran system with the silent arrogance of a god. It ignored the chattering, primitive radio signals, the blinking orbital debris, and took its position geostationary above the planet's largest landmass. Its shadow fell across nations. The broadcast was sent, a masterpiece of multi-frequency communication, translating seamlessly into every major human language. It spoke of the glorious peace of the hegemony, the privilege of contributing to the greater galactic whole, the inevitable futility of resistance. It demanded the immediate surrender of all planetary governing bodies. The Kthari commander, Fleet Director Valkor, waited. The standard response time for a species at this tier was between 3.7 and 5.2 planetary rotations. He received a response in 6.3 hours. It was a tight beam, encrypted radio wave transmission. Primitive, but clear. The translation software parsed it. It contained a single word: no. Valkor's antennae twitched in mild surprise. Not defiance, that implied emotional weight. This was an error. A corrupted data bit in the species' collective cognition. He authorized the demonstration. A tungsten rod, no larger than a shuttle, was magnetically launched. It streaked across the atmosphere, impacting with calculated precision in the center of a large, uninhabited desert on the planet's third-largest continent. The resulting fireball was visible from orbit. The seismic shockwave registered on every human continent. The message was universal: your strongest weapons are our lightest taps. The hegemony waited again. The response came in 4.1 hours. Same primitive band. A different voice, female, calm. Unacceptable. You have damaged a sovereign world. Withdraw immediately or be fired upon. Valkor actually emitted a soft chitter, the Kthari equivalent of a scoff. Fired upon? With what? Their chemical-propelled orbital platforms? Their pathetically slow interplanetary probes? It was like an insect threatening a storm. He ordered the resplendent Clarion to activate its point defense screens and deploy a flight of 5 Shrieker-class fighters. A show of force to shatter the illusion. The fighters, like silver hornets, danced through high orbit, effortlessly vaporizing several defunct satellites in dazzling streaks of light. Look, the display said. Look upon the tools of children, and now look upon the instruments of gods. Silence from the planet. For 18 hours. Valcor assumed the correction was complete. The humans were in shock, their leadership scrambling. He prepared to broadcast the articles again. Then, the long-range gravitic sensors pinged. Rising conflict. On the bridge of the resplendent Clarion, the sensor officer's carapace plates rippled in confusion. Fleet Director. Inbound contact. Bearing 030, stellar zenith. Range, 1 light minute. It emerged from deep space, beyond the system's outer debris cloud. Identification. Valcor asked, his primary eyes on the main holoprojector. Profile is inconsistent. Mass readings are fluctuating. Energy signature is anomalous. It does not match any known hegemony, consortium, or free trader design. It is large. A vagrant mercenary group? Perhaps the Florians, seeking to profit from chaos.
Valcor mused.
The Florians were occasional nuisances, traders in black market tech. Negative. No biotic signatures match Florian patterns. The power output. Fleet Director, it is rising. Rapidly. A new icon appeared on the tactical display. It was designated unknown. The ship's AI began sketching its profile based on passive sensor data. The silhouette that formed was blocky, asymmetrical. It lacked the flowing organic lines of Cthari design or the elegant symmetry of the older races. It looked built, hammered together. A brutalist wedge of alloy and composite, studded with protrusions that could be sensor arrays, weapon mounts, or crude radiators. It was trailing a significant amount of thermal waste, a plume of infrared that glowed like a beacon against the cosmic cold. Inefficient. Ugly. They are hailing us, the comms officer announced. Put it through. The holoprojector shimmered. The image that formed was not of a bridge, but of a bare, gray-walled compartment. A bipedal figure stood centered. It was human male, clad in a form-fitting dark uniform devoid of ornamentation save for a single, stylized insignia on the chest, a circle encompassing a cluster of stars and a single central sword. His face was pale, his features sharp, his eyes a flat, uncompromising gray. He looked tired. Not weary, but tired in the way a tectonic plate is tired of the sea's constant erosion. Cthari vessel resplendent Clarion, the human spoke. His voice was a dry rasp, translated perfectly by the ship's systems. This is Captain Elias Thorne of the Terran sovereignty vessel TSV Retribution. You are in violation of Terran sovereign space. You have committed an act of war upon a Terran-protected world. Power down your weapons and gravitic drives. Prepare to be boarded for inspection and surrender of command crew. The bridge was utterly silent. Then, a low hum of mandible clicks and antennae vibrations filled the air. Amusement. Valcor stepped forward, his own imposing four-armed form rendered in perfect detail for the human to see. Human Captain. Your delusion is noted. You float in a primitive radiation can. Your species has not yet achieved true FDL. This object you arrive in is a disgrace to engineering. It offends the very stars. You will order your planetary governments to comply with the Articles of Subjugation, or the resplendent Clarion will begin systematic reduction of your population centers. This is your final logic. Captain Thorne didn't blink. He stared into the holographic eyes of the alien commander for a long silent moment. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was the precursor to an avalanche. You talk a lot for something that's about to die, Thorne said, his voice still quiet. You hurt my planet. You threatened my people. You don't get to talk anymore. The transmission cut. Tactical. Full active scan. I want that heap of scrap identified. Valcor barked, his comm fracturing for the first time. Active sensor beams, capable of mapping a planet's core, lanced out from the resplendent Clarion toward the human ship. And they splashed. The sensor officer recoiled. Energy dispersion. The hull is scattering our LiDAR and gravitic pulses. Composition unknown. It's absorbing and re-radiating the scans as meaningless noise. Weapon status. Bringing primary plasma lances online. Fighters are moving to intercept. On the display, the 5 Shrieker fighters formed an arrowhead and accelerated toward the Retribution. They moved with breathtaking speed and grace, weaving in a complex pattern designed to confuse targeting systems. The human ship didn't weave. It didn't evade. It simply turned. Its main drive, a massive block of thrusters at its stern, flared to life. Not the clean blue-white of plasma or the shimmer of gravitic manipulation, but a raw, violent, orange gout of fire, a continuous nuclear explosion chained and directed. It was propulsion by sheer, unadulterated fury. The ship began to move, not with grace, but with the terrifying, inevitable momentum of a glacial calving. "They're accelerating on a direct intercept course with the fighters," the tactical officer called. "No attempt to avoid. Speed is, by the void, they're exceeding their projected structural limits." The Shriekers opened fire. Brilliant lances of superheated plasma, capable of melting through battleplate, streaked across the void. They impacted the Retribution's hull. Fireworks of molten metal and vaporized armor bloomed across its surface. Sensors showed significant outer hull damage. Atmosphere vented in frozen plumes. But the ship didn't slow. It didn't change course. It didn't fire back. It just kept coming, a wounded, smoking beast charging the darts that stung it. "Evasive!" the lead Shrieker pilot screamed over the comm, but it was too late. The Retribution plowed through the center of their formation. It didn't shoot them. It didn't need to. One fighter, attempting a last-second dodge, clipped the human ship's jagged starboard side superstructure. The elegant silver craft disintegrated into a cloud of shrapnel. Another was caught in the monstrous vessel's wake, tumbled and shredded by the turbulent hellstorm of its drive plume. The remaining three scattered, their pilot's confidence shattered. On the resplendent Clarion's bridge, the laughter had died. Valcor stared at the tactical display. The human ship was still coming, a scarred, angry bullet aimed directly at his heart. It was irrational. It was suicidal. No civilized species fought like this. "They are attempting a ramming maneuver," the tactical officer yelled, disbelief in his voice. "All power to forward shields. Fire primary lances, continuous burst." The resplendent Clarion's main weapons, two spines along its dorsal hull, glowed with captured starfire. Twin beams of incandescent death, thick as ancient trees, lanced out and struck the Retribution head-on. The human ship's forward shields, if they had any, failed instantly. The plasma consumed the prow, melting armor, vaporizing compartments. The entire front quarter of the vessel became a blinding molten mess. Secondary explosions rippled down its length. "Target destroyed," the tactical officer stated, relief evident. But the sensor officer's voice was a shrill click. "Negative. Mass and momentum unchanged. It's still coming. The forward sections are slag, but the core is intact. They've compartmentalized the entire damage zone. The wreckage is being held in place by internal force fields and structural reinforcement. It's using its own molten bow as a battering ram."
Impossible.
No species engineered warships to survive being decapitated as a tactical function. The distance closed. 1,000 kilometers. 500. 100. Emergency thrust. Get us out of its path. Valcor commanded, true fear seizing his thorax for the first time. The resplendent Clarion's gravitic drives whined, trying to push the massive dreadnought sideways. It began a slow, ponderous drift. The TSV Retribution, a flying mountain of its own corpse, struck not a direct blow, but a terrible glancing one. Its molten, superheated prow sheared along the Cthari ship's starboard flank. The sound was not heard in the vacuum, but felt through the structure, a gut-wrenching scream of tearing alloy, shattering crystal composites, and exploding plasma conduits. Entire sections of the resplendent Clarion's elegant hull were peeled open like the skin of a fruit. Atmosphere and crew were vomited into the void. Internal fires sparked, fueled by exotic gases. The human ship, now a grotesque half-melted monstrosity, spun away from the impact, trailing debris and frozen corpses, both Cthari and human. Its main drive sputtered and died. Silence. On the bridge of the wounded resplendent Clarion, alarms shrieked. Damage reports flooded in. Secondary explosions still rumbled through the ship's innards. A third of its weapon systems were offline. Its starboard gravitic drive was crippled. Valcor pulled himself up from the deck, a crack in his chest plate oozing green hemolymph. He stared at the drifting human vessel on the viewscreen. It was dead. It had to be dead. Nothing could survive that. Then, lights flickered across its remaining superstructure. Emergency power? No. The pattern was deliberate. A specific sequence. A new, weaker transmission came in, audio only. It was Captain Thorne's voice, raspier now, punctuated by the sound of screaming metal, cracking ice, and desperate human voices shouting in the background. "Kthari vessel," he gasped. That was a warning shot. "My spinal mount is still charged. Surrender, or I will turn what's left of your pretty ship into a temporary star." Spinal mount.
Valkor whispered.
He looked at the sensor readout of the human wreck. Deep within its ravaged core, behind layers of collapsed decks and bulkheads, a new energy signature was spiking. An incomprehensible power reading, focused along the central axis of the ship. It was a weapon. A weapon they hadn't even used. This hadn't been a battle. It had been a statement. A demonstration of tolerance. See how much punishment we can take before we even need to use our gun. The Empire panicked. That can't be a human warship. Valkor breathed, his mind reeling. It's impossible. It violates every principle. It's a berserker's cudgel. A madman's sculpture. His tactical officer, shell-shocked, turned. "Fleet Director, what are your orders?" Valkor looked at the crippled, yet still terrifyingly potent human vessel. He looked at the casualty reports from his own ship. He thought of the Comno, the patient warning, and then this calculated horrific display of sacrificial violence. This was not the logic of a superior species correcting an inferior one. This was the logic of a cornered animal that had somehow learned to build a trap for the hunter out of its own bones. Signal the resplendent clarion stand down," Valkor said, the words tasting of ash. "All systems to idle. And open a channel to that thing. Tell them the Kthari Empire wishes to discuss terms." Human response. The terms were not discussed in the cold void, but on the ravaged surface of the TSV Retribution. A Kthari shuttle, bearing Fleet Director Valkor and an honor guard of his most seasoned warriors, docked with a human ship via makeshift magnetized seal on a less damaged dorsal airlock. The journey over had been a silent, humiliating crawl past the graveyard of their own superiority, the shredded flank of the resplendent Clarion. When the airlock cycled, the Kthari were met not by a delegation, but by a single human in a patched environment suit, holding a dented tablet. The suit's faceplate was scratched, but behind it, the eyes were the same flat gray as Captain Thorne's. "Follow me," the human said, her voice tinny over the suit radio. "Watch your step. Gravity plating is unstable in sections." They were led into hell. The interior of the Retribution was a charnel house of engineering. Exposed cables spat sparks. Broken conduits dritched fluids that froze instantly in the cold patches and boiled in the hot ones. Emergency lights cast a grim, blood-red pall over everything. The air was a thin, metallic-tasting mixture, thick with the smell of ozone, scorched metal, and something coppery and organic. And there were bodies. Human crew, in sealed body bags, strapped to the walls in orderly rows. Dozens of them. Yet, amidst the carnage, there was frantic activity. Crew members with soot-stained faces and bandaged limbs welded plates over hull breaches, rerouted cables with brutal efficiency, and shouted technical jargon that sounded like a battle chant. They worked around the dead with a grim, respectful urgency.
No panique.
Just a terrible, focused determination. Valkor's compound eyes took it all in, his warrior's mind assessing. This ship was a tomb. By all rights, every being aboard should be dead or dying of radiation poisoning, trauma, or system failure. Yet they worked. They functioned. They were led to what must have been the secondary command center, a reinforced chamber deep in the ship's core. It was cramped, lit by flickering holoscreens, and filled with a cacophony of damage reports and low, tense voices. In the center, strapped into a command chair that was bolted to the deck, was Captain Elias Thorne. He was not the pristine figure from the transmission. One side of his face was a mass of synth flesh and bruising. His uniform was torn and stained with dried human blood, a shocking rust-brown color. His left arm was in a makeshift immobilizer. But his gray eyes were clear, sharp, and utterly focused on the displays before him. He dismissed an engineer with a nod, then turned those eyes on Valkor. "Fleet Director," Thorne rasped. Welcome to the Retribution. Sorry for the mess. We weren't expecting guests. Valcor drew himself up, his forearms clasped behind his back in a display of composed dignity he did not feel. Your vessel is a testament to your species' tolerance for pain, Captain. A curious design philosophy. It's a design philosophy called winning, Thorn said, a ghost of that not smile touching his lips. You build something that can lose its head, its heart, and 3 of its limbs, and it'll still have 1 fist left to hit you with. My engineers tell me you're leaking drive plasma from your starboard manifold. You have about 6 hours before it destabilizes your core and takes out half this orbital plane. We've got a repair team prepping.
Velkores antenna esti fened.
A repair team? For his ship. This was a trick. A ploy to board the resplendent Clarion. Your offer is noted. Unnecessary. Our damage control is capable. Your damage control is trying to fix a quantum state crystal lattice with a harmonic wrench, Thorn said, waving his good hand at a screen where a schematic of the Cthari ship was displayed, highlighting the failing manifold in pulsating red. We've been analyzing your systems since you entered the system. Beautiful tech. Finicky. As hell. You need a shaped charge of focus plasma, at exactly 8.3 kilojoules, to weld the breach without causing a cascade failure. My chief engineer Ruiz invented the tool to do it 20 minutes ago. She's itching to try it. Before Valcor could process this, the casual admission of deep system scanning, the rapid invention of a solution, a young human officer staggered into the chamber. His face was pale, 1 arm in a sling. Captain. Medbay 3 is gone. We've lost Dr. Chun and the entire surgical team. The wounded from sections G through K. We have nowhere to put them. Life support in the port habitation block is failing. We're losing them, sir. A deep, weary sadness passed over Thorn's face, there and gone in an instant, replaced by steel. Route them to the forward cargo bay. Rig the emergency tents. Use the power from the starboard auxiliary. Get anyone with field medic training, anyone at all, down there. Go. The officer nodded and hurried out. Thorn turned back to Valcor. You see our situation, Fleet Director. We are busy. So let's be concise. You will transmit a full withdrawal of the articles of subjugation to Earth. You will provide full sensor and tactical data on your approach vector and any other hegemony assets in the sector. In return, we will stabilize your ship, allow you to leave under your own power, and not turn what's left of your dreadnought into a cloud of expanding vapor. Valcor felt a cold fury rise. You are in no position to make demands, human. Your ship is dying. Your crew is dying. 1 more shot from my secondary batteries would trigger a breach in your own antimatter containment, Thorn interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Which we also know about. We've rigged the Retribution's core to go prompt critical on my command. Or if I die. Or if our internal security sensors detect a Cthari energy weapon discharge within 5 kilometers. You're not negotiating with a ship, Valcor. You. Renegotiating with a bomb I'm sitting on top of, and I am very, very tired. The revelation hung in the smoky air. A dead man's switch. A final, nihilistic threat. It was the act of a fanatic. But as Valcor looked around the chamber, at the humans working calmly amid the ruins of their vessel, he didn't see fanaticism. He saw calculation. He saw acceptance. They had walked into this battle knowing this was a possible, even probable, end state. They had planned for it. Before he could formulate a response, a new alarm sounded, a different, piercing shriek. A human at a sensor console swore violently. Captain. New contact. Emerging from the soul, 7 gravity well.
Qatari signature.
It's another dreadnought class. Designation. It's the Silent Judgment. They must have been a trailing reserve. On the main screen, a new sleek silver icon appeared, moving at high speed toward the crippled duo. Valcor's spirit surged. Reinforcements. The Silent Judgment was the sister ship of the resplendent Clarion, commanded by the ruthless fleet director XYLVAN. The humans were finished. He straightened, his mandibles clicking with restored authority. It seems the logic of the situation has shifted, Captain. The Silent Judgment will be here in minutes. You will order your crew to stand down immediately, or you will witness the sterilization of your homeworld from your dying bridge. A profound silence fell over the human command center. Every crew member stopped, looking to Thorn. Captain Elias Thorn closed his eyes for a single long second. When he opened them, they held not despair, but a deep, terrible resolve. He unstrapped himself from his chair, moving stiffly. He picked up a handset from the console, an ancient-looking device with a coiled cord. "All hands," he said, his voice echoing through the ruined ship's intercom. "This is the captain. Condition Zulu is confirmed. Repeat, Condition Zulu. Execute Plan Ragnarok. Godspeed to you all." He put the handset down. All around him, the crew changed. The grim determination hardened into something else. Something serene. They returned to their stations, but their movements were now deliberate, final. Some reached into lockers, pulling out sidearms or heirloom knives, placing them on their consoles. Others simply touched photographs of loved ones stuck to their screens. Thorn turned to Valcor. "You were right, Fleet Director. Our ship is dying. My crew is dying. But we are not dead yet. And a human Fleet Director is at their most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose, except the chance to make sure you lose too." He nodded to his comms officer. "Open a channel to the silent judgment. All frequencies." The channel hissed open. Thorn leaned toward the mic. "To the approaching Kthari vessel. This is Captain Elias Thorn of the TSV Retribution. You are entering a zone of total war. We are a crippled vessel. We pose no threat to you. We are surrendering." He paused, and his eyes locked with Valcor's, holding a universe of fire in that gray gaze. "Our only request is that you come closer." Climax. On the bridge of the Silent Judgment, Fleet Director XYLVAN watched the transmission with cold amusement. The human captain's face was a masterpiece of desperation and defeat. The sensor scans confirmed it. The resplendent Clarion was badly wounded, and the human ship was a drifting radioactive derelict. This was not a war, it was a mop-up operation. "He is begging for mercy, or for a quick death," XYLVAN mused to his tactical officer. "Pathetic. But cunning. He hopes we will board, to take prisoners and salvage their primitive technology. He plans a final, spiteful ambush with small arms. Shall we obliterate them from range, Fleet Director?" XYLVAN considered. Obliteration was the safe, logical choice. But there was value in capture. The Hegemony Science Councils would want to dissect this bizarre vessel, to understand its crude resilience, and to personally accept the surrender of the species that had dared to bloody the Empire's nose. There was a certain appeal. "No. Hold fire. Move us to standard boarding distance. Deploy the Marauder battalions. Scramble all fighters for close cover. I want that ship's data cores intact. And I want Captain Thorn alive. His defiance will be a useful lesson for the rest of his species." The Silent Judgment, a pristine and powerful silver leviathan, glided closer, a swarm of shuttles and fighters erupting from its bays like parasites from a queen. Back on the Retribution, Valcor watched this unfold on the flickering screens. He felt a confusion of emotions, relief at rescue, shame at his defeat, and a growing gnawing dread he could not name. The humans around him were too calm. They had holstered their sidearms. They sat at their stations, hands in their laps, watching the approach of the Kthari Armada with an eerie quiet expectation. "What is Plan Ragnarok?" Valcor asked Thorn, his voice low. Thorn, leaning heavily on his console, didn't look at him. He was watching a countdown timer on his main screen. It read 2 minutes and 17 seconds. "An old story," Thorn whispered. "The final battle. Where the gods and monsters all die, and the world is reborn from the ashes." He finally turned his head. "You wanted to know what makes a human warship, Valcor? It's not the armor. It's not the guns. It's the crew. And a human crew never ever goes down alone." 1 minute. Throughout the ship, a low, powerful hum began to build. Not the sound of engines, but of massive capacitors charging. The lights dimmed, then brightened, pulsing in time with the hum. On the Silent Judgment, the sensor officer jolted. "Fleet Director. Massive energy spike from the human wreck. Off the scale. It's not weapons. It's their main reactor. They're overloading it. They're going critical."
XYLVAN's composure shattered.
"All craft, evasive. Reverse thrust. maximum power to forward shields. But it was too late. They had come too close, lured by the promise of surrender and easy victory. Midnight. Captain Elias Thorne closed his eyes. For Earth, he breathed. The TSV Retribution did not explode. It unfolded. Concealed panels across its ravaged hull blew away. Beneath them were not weapon ports, but vast, crude arrays of projectors, the product of a technology that embraced brute force over finesse. They glowed with a sickly green-tinged light. And they activated. It was not a beam, not a missile. It was a field. A propagating wave of distorted space-time, unleashed in a single hemispherical pulse from the dying human ship. The science of it was crude, violent, and horrifying, a localized gravity shear of unimaginable magnitude, created by forcing the ship's dying singularity core to vomit its being into reality all at once. The wave hit the silent judgment. The beautiful, silver dreadnought didn't have time to scream. Its forward shields flared for a microsecond, then collapsed. The gravity shear did not cut or melt. It wrung. The ship's structure, engineered for graceful stress distribution, was subjected to forces that twisted it in opposing directions simultaneously. The silent judgment contorted like a toy in a god's fist, its spine snapping, its hull plates buckling inwards and tearing outwards. Secondary explosions raced along its length as containment failed, culminating in a final cataclysmic detonation of its own antimatter reserves. The expanding fireball consumed the shuttles, the fighters, everything within 100 kilometers. The wave washed over the resplendent Clarion as well, but it was attenuated, off-axis. Still, it hit like the fist of a titan. The already wounded ship was hurled backwards, its structure groaning in protest, more breaches opening in its hull. On the bridge of the resplendent Clarion, Valcor was thrown to the deck. When he struggled up, the view screen was filled with the dying light of the silent judgment, a new miniature sun slowly fading. Of the TSV Retribution, there was no debris.
No trace.
It had converted itself entirely into that single awful weapon. It had erased itself to erase the enemy. Silence, deeper than the void, filled the bridge. The human crew on the resplendent Clarion's command center, the ones who had come to help with repairs, simply stopped working. They looked toward where their ship had been. One, a young woman with burns on her face, slowly saluted. Then, without a word, they returned to their tasks, sealing the Kthari ship's breaches with a quiet, terrifying efficiency. Valcor stumbled to the comm station, shoving the stunned officer aside. He opened a channel, not to the Empire, but to the planet below. "People of Earth," he transmitted, his voice cracked, stripped of all its imperial pride. "This is Fleet Director Valcor of the Kthari Hegemony. The engagement is over. We are withdrawing." Resolution. The story did not end with a triumphant human fleet chasing the Kthari from the system. There was no such fleet. The TSV Retribution had been Earth's secret, a prototype, a desperate gamble built in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt with stolen glances at reverse-engineered debris from earlier, quieter probes the Hegemony hadn't even noticed. It was a ship built from paranoia, ingenuity, and a profound understanding of asymmetric warfare. The Kthari Empire did withdraw, but they did not forget. The incident was classified, the loss of the silent judgment explained as a tragic reactor accident. But in the halls of the Imperial Conclave, a new file was opened. Subject: Homo sapiens. Threat reassessment, *catastrophic. Reclassify from Class 7 to Omega-class contingency star. The report, written by Valcor himself, contained the following lines. Do not mistake their technological disparity for weakness. They compensate with terrifying psychological adaptability and a limitless tolerance for sacrifice. Their warships are not tools of war, they are deliberate tragedies waiting to happen. They do not fight to achieve a higher state of peace, as we do. They fight to ensure survival, and they define survival in the most absolute vengeful terms imaginable. To wage war on humanity is not to conquer a species. It is to attempt to extinguish a fire by pouring yourself onto it. You may succeed, but you will not remain unburned. On Earth, they built a monument. Not a towering spire of victory, but a simple black granite wall in a quiet garden on the lunar surface, where the stars were always visible. On it were engraved the names of the 1,847 crew of the TSV Retribution. At the top was the name, Captain Elias Thorne. And below that, the ship's motto, born in that final desperate hour, "Come closer." Years later, a Kthari historical analyst, studying the event, made a chilling discovery. The gravity shear weapon, the Ragnarok device, had a theoretical maximum range. The silent judgment had been well inside it. But the resplendent clarion had also been within the outer fringe of that range. The weapon's effects could have been tuned to be omnidirectional, to destroy both Kthari ships. The human captain had chosen a directional setting. He had spared the ship he had already beaten. It was not mercy. It was a message. A message delivered with the subtlety of a supernova. We could have killed you all. We chose not to. Remember that. And the galaxy began to remember. The story spread in whispers, in traders' tales, in the intelligence briefings of every major power. Of the young backwater species that had looked an empire in the eye, smiled a death's-head smile, and said no of the warship that was impossible, that was less a vessel and more a statement carved in steel and blood. They learned that humanity's greatest strength was not in how hard they could hit, but in how much they could endure before they decided to hit back. And that when they did not fight for conquest, or for glory, or for resources. They fought for each other. For the idea of home. And they would turn science into sorcery, and their own bodies into weapons, and the very concept of defeat into a final terrifying victory. For the first time, the galaxy understood a profound and unsettling truth, that the most dangerous force in the cosmos is not supreme power, but unwavering love, wrapped in absolute irreversible wrath. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.